I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula. We're the host of the Strictly Stalking podcast.
Strictly Stalking is a true crime podcast that explores stalking stories told by the survivors in their own words.
Join us every Tuesday as we interview survivors, advocates, and experts to give you a deep dive into the workings of a stalking case.
Would you know where to turn if you or someone you know is being stalked? We'll also give you the resources to fight back, know your rights, and get justice.
Find Strictly Stalking wherever you listen to podcasts from Podcast One.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors.
Please welcome Alice and Brett from the Prosecutors Podcast.
Hello. Can you guys hear us?
This is the weirdest thing ever. I'm just saying that. This is awesome. Thank you.
I'm going to move this just because Brett doesn't think about how I'm really short and people can't see me when there's a bag on the table.
It's got our Topo Chicos in it.
Thank you for bringing Topo Chicos.
Yeah. Can't do a show without Topo Chico, right? No bourbon, unfortunately. But, maybe later today. Thank you guys so much for choosing to spend your time here at CrimeCon with us. Y'all are awesome.
We can't believe y'all are all here because there's so many exciting things out there. So we're going to try to make this worth your time. So keep us accountable. We really want to hear your questions at the end. So if for some reason somebody up here is really verbose, just like wave your hand and be like, question time. Will you guys do that for us?
Yes, and we do. We want to leave as much time as possible for questions. And we thought about how are we going to do this and what are we going to do here with my live, in-person co-host, Alice. We thought about doing a show. We're like, no, we don't want to do that. That would be boring. Some of you have probably heard the show before. Maybe some of you have never heard the show before. But either way, we thought, let's go through some of our favorite cases that we've done, and let's talk about the rules that we set out all the way back in the first episode. Those of you who hadn't listened to the first episode, we laid out sort of 10 rules that were going to guide what we did. And our thought behind that was we wanted to give you our perspective. Because people always like to talk about everybody's biased, right? Everybody's biased because they disagree with me, so they must be biased. We have a perspective that we come from. And that perspective is sort of laid out in these rules. And the rules define how we look at the cases. So we thought, let's go through the rules and talk about cases that we've covered and how the rules apply to those. And then, like I said, we're going to try and save as much time as possible for questions because we really want to answer your questions. We know you guys will have some awesome ones. So with that, Alice.
Yeah, but before we dive into those rules, because I know all of you came to hear about very strict rules that we follow, we thought we'd tell you a little bit about ourselves. If you haven't heard the podcast, we are the prosecutors, and we are real practicing attorneys even to this day, and we prosecuted cases together for quite some time, and we've worked in several jobs together. So Brett and I go way back, and a few years ago, when I was on maternity leave with my second child, I wasn't sleeping at all, and Brett said, let's do a podcast. And I said, no, that's crazy. And he said, no, I promise. People are going to want to hear about it from the lawyer's perspective and specifically the prosecutor's perspective. And again, I told him, no one's going to want to learn about the rules of evidence, 404B, how investigations are run, how boring. And so I said, okay. Only because I thought no one was going to listen, and I thought I'll appease my friend, we'll record a couple episodes, and then no one will listen, and then we'll go on our merry way.
Yeah, and you guys may remember when we did the first few episodes, whenever we'd talk about something legal, we'd always warn you. Like, okay, we're going to talk about 404B, survive this, and it'll get interesting again. And then so many people reached out and said, actually, we really like that. We like to hear about sort of the legal side and the rules and how this stuff works. They ended up doing legal briefs, which is a lot more of that. But, the prosecutors, the original podcast is still our first love, and we try and work that stuff in and keep it as interesting as possible. So thank you to all of you for actually listening to enough episodes that Alice could not back out and had to continue to do the podcast. We absolutely wouldn't be here without you guys.
That's true. So, Brett, really quick, who are you? Tell us like a little bit about you.
So I'm Brett. I'm from Alabama. Roll Tide. After graduating from Alabama, went to Harvard. Was a lawyer. It's awesome, I guess. Turned out to be a prosecutor after a little while. Also write horror novels. You know, been doing the prosecution thing now, I guess, for 5 years. Before that, I was with the state. Did appeals, a lot of appeals, particularly death penalty appeals. So saw a lot of really terrible things during that time. But yeah, glad to be here and glad to be doing this with you guys.
And I'm Alice. Let's see, where am I from? I'm from Austin, Texas, originally. Yay, Austin! After college, I went to law school at Yale. Really, honestly, never thought I would practice law because I didn't know any lawyers in my life at all. Those of you who've listened to the podcast know that I'm from an immigrant family, so there were no lawyers because, you know, my parents don't even speak English. And so I went to law school because I didn't know what else to do. And then I kind of surprised myself that I loved the law, especially loved being in the courtroom and trial level work, and I loved public service. So after clerking for a couple of judges and getting to see a lot of different types of cases, I decided to start practice at the trial level. And that's where Brett and I met. And then we became prosecutors together, shared a wall, like our offices shared a wall. We would tap things to each other and be like, did you see this crazy case? And worked on a lot of cases together, tried cases together. And when you try cases with someone, it really is like being in the trenches with them. I mean, we have been to some far-flung places, talked to some people who really wanted us dead, you know, had to figure out a lot of things, just the two of us, as we're investigating these cases and prosecuting them together. And it was kind of through that friendship and through that work experience that is the basis of our podcast. You know, everything you hear us talk about on the podcast, that's what we do in our real lives. That's how we discuss our cases together. That's how we help each other refine our thinking and our legal analysis to get to the right answer or closest to the right answer and make those really important judgment calls of how to prosecute our cases in the most just manner. So I left prosecution, unfortunately, about a year ago. So now I'm in private practice, but still practicing law. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, when Alice left, she was my boss, so it was good. You know, when she finally left, I was like, yes, I don't have to work for Alice anymore. But I miss her terribly, and I'm glad that we get to do this because it's one way we get to hang out, even if it's virtually. Alice will see me and say, I missed you so much. I'm like, I just saw you, but it's on the television, so that doesn't count as much. Okay, so let's talk about cases. Talk about rules. So like I said, we have 10 of them, the 10 commandments of our podcast, I guess. And the first one I think is probably the most obvious because it's the rule that most people, when you're talking about crime, you're talking about science, whatever you're talking about, Occam's razor, right? The simplest answer is most likely to be correct. Doesn't mean it's always correct. Doesn't mean that just because it's the simplest answer, that's the one you should depend on, but it's a good place to start. And if you're going to move yourself off of that, what you should be looking for is evidence to push you off of that. So even if you wish it weren't true, you really want to have something to point to hang your hat on. We thought, what better episode than the hollow moon theory episode to use as an example for this. Now, look, I know not all of y'all listen to the hollow moon stuff because you're like, oh, another one of Brett's crazy conspiracy theories. I'll wait for the true crime, right? But basically, if you didn't listen to it, there's this theory that the moon is hollow and actually it's an alien spaceship. Totally believable, right? You know, it's right up there with paganistic cults in Indiana in believability. But you never know, it could be true. And we went through some of the evidence that makes you think that. But the problem was, for all of that evidence, there was some other explanation, some innocuous explanation. So you find all this artificial stuff on the moon, all these isotopes that can't exist, right? But then you realize, actually, no, in space, they're generated all the time. Stuff like that. You know, the craters, why are they shallow? Because they've eroded away over millions of years. And what you end up when you're trying to decide, is the moon hollow because it's a spaceship, or is the moon just different from the Earth and that's why you're getting all these different kind of readings? You're probably going to end up on the moon is just different. I'm holding out hope that the moon is hollow, but I'm waiting for some sort of proof to show me that. And hollow moon's a little ridiculous example, but it applies in every single case you look at. If you're listening to a true crime case, it's probably because it's interesting. It has some interesting questions, has some interesting theories, has some sexy theories, as Alice likes to say, but a lot of times those sexy theories aren't true.
And it's when we laid out these rules in the very first episode, we hadn't really covered any cases yet. But this particular rule, it's so important that it's number one, has kind of taken on a life of its own, that it's given us sort of a nickname. Because I know we're all at a, true crime convention, and we like the best story. The best story wins. We say this all the time. In front of a jury, the best story wins. To be a good lawyer, you have to be a good storyteller. But if you listen to our podcast, you know that we've been called, and we now call ourselves the cold water prosecutors, because we pour cold water on those really exciting theories when the evidence just doesn't point to it. And sometimes if you have to do a bunch of mental gymnastics to arrive at the conclusion, it might not be very likely. And that's why there's all those hypotheticals that we walk through in our episodes. Okay, if you think this is the conclusion, you'd have to believe X, Y, and Z. Which could happen, because I guess anything's possible, but are they likely to happen? And part of these rules are laid out also because we hope that we're not just talking to the people who listen to our podcast. We're hoping that you're getting something out of this, in that you now begin to trust your gut and trust your own rational thinking. All of us are gifted with a brain, and a brain that works. And I think a lot of times these days, a different conclusion than theirs. We say this over and over, and we truly mean it. Don't take our word for it. We cite every single source, that we use in our research, and we want people to go read the primary sources. Go read the trial transcript. Go read the expert report. Go read the police report. Go listen to that 911 call yourself. We will give you our interpretation based on years of practice and experience in it, but don't take our word for it. Use that brain and be, the rational thinker that all of you can be. So kind of with that, the second rule goes along with the whole cold water prosecutors, and that's if there's no evidence of a crime, there probably wasn't a crime. And even though we mostly cover true crime cases, there are several cases that I think in the true crime community have taken on a life of its own, where people come up with these big theories about how a terrible crime has been committed. And when we dive into the evidence, we just don't see evidence of a crime. Terrible things can happen. Terrible things can happen and result in someone's death, but maybe a crime didn't happen. And a case that comes to mind that we covered a while ago is Damien Hurd. Very sad case of a young man who was found hanging from a tree, deceased. And it is a very sad set of circumstances surrounding the night that led to his ultimate demise. And there are a lot of people who believe that there was some terrible crime and some conspiracy that led to his death. And we dug into the evidence, and ultimately, unfortunately, it looked like that there was no crime that had been committed, that he had ended his life with his own hands. And that is very difficult to come to, especially maybe for the family or for loved ones who just can't imagine that their loved one can end up like that. But we think it doesn't do anyone justice to go against the evidence and create some sort of fantastical story when the truth might be difficult, but the truth might ultimately get to a place that it can help others and help those who love him heal.
Yeah, and I think the other side of the coin of that case is Ellen Greenberg, which a lot of you have followed. And that's a case where what happened there is still up in the air and needs more investigation. And it may turn out that once a real investigation is conducted, the conclusion will be suicide. But when you look at the evidence, once again, the evidence, there are a lot of questions. There are questions about how she could have inflicted those knife wounds on herself. There are questions about whether she was even physically capable of doing so. Questions about whether some of the wounds were post-mortem, which obviously if they were post-mortem, she did not inflict them on herself. Questions about how the body was found. Questions about how the scene was cleaned up. Those are the things you look for, right? And as I said, maybe eventually you investigate it and all those questions are answered. And then maybe there isn't any evidence of a crime. But that's not where we're at now. And I think that's a good example of sort of the other side of that rule. When there is evidence of a crime, there may very well be one. The third one, which when we started off, we thought was probably going to be pretty controversial and may still be controversial, and that's usually law enforcement can be trusted. In most cases, the police are not involved in some sort of conspiracy. In most cases, they're doing the best they can. They may make mistakes. They may do things that when you look back on it, you realize, man, that was dumb. The case we think about here is Murdaugh. In the Murdaugh case, there were a lot of questions about law enforcement. If you watch the trial, an undercurrent of the defense theory was that the police were somehow involved in sort of planning evidence or covering up evidence. Or on the flip side, they had sort of on the one hand, they're creating this whole scene. On the other hand, they're woefully incompetent and they're allowing too many people on the scene, which absolutely happened. But the reason it absolutely happened was because the opposite was true. They weren't looking to frame Murdaugh. If anything, they were too solicitous of him and his family, right? But you see that attack on it. Oh, there's this overwhelming evidence of his guilt. Well, how can you trust that evidence if you don't trust the person who collected it? And there are absolutely cases where questionable things are done by prosecutors and police. There are cases where prosecutors and police fabricate evidence. There are cases where prosecutors and police pressure witnesses to say things that aren't true. It absolutely happens. But once again, you need an evidentiary base for that. Your starting position shouldn't be the police are probably corrupt. And we don't ever start off in that position. In our experience working with officers, they tend to really want to get it right. And when they mess it up, it tends to be because of one of our future rules we'll be mentioning, not because they are involved in some sort of conspiracy or they're trying to frame somebody.
And this goes along with something, in order for law enforcement to be corrupt across the board, there has to be some sort of conspiracy. Conspiracy is just more than one person is working together. We've worked in governments across the board a long time. I will just give you a little bit secret about your wonderful government, whatever jurisdiction you're in. They're not that good at pulling off conspiracies. It's really hard to do so. And you're giving them way too much credit. Having been, a cog in the machine, I can tell you that. And also, we've said this a lot. When there's more than one person involved, it is really difficult to keep your mouth shut. Not necessarily because you're going to snark on the person you pulled off the conspiracy with, but because people get tired and they say things. They get drunk and they say things. They think they're in a loving relationship with someone they can trust and they say things. It is really hard not to let it slip when there's more than one person involved. And we've seen this time and time again. Part of our job as prosecutors is to get people to crack and talk about other people. And you know what? We have a really good track record. And it's not because we're scary. I'm not scary at all. But for the most part, you say the right things and people just want to answer you. And by answering you, the veneer of the conspiracy begins to crack. That's why we go after a lot of conspiracy cases. If you want to get away with the perfect crime, don't involve anybody else.
Yeah, and that is our next rule. The conspiracies are hard to pull off. And Scott Peterson's a good example of this. So Scott Peterson is obviously a controversial case. There are people who think Scott Peterson is innocent. But in order for Scott Peterson to be innocent, a couple things have to have happened. Multiple people have to have been involved in a conspiracy to not only murder his wife, but to put her body in a place where he just so happened to be on the day she disappeared. That has to be something you believe happened. And maybe you think it was the incompetent burglars who couldn't even keep from being arrested for burglary somehow managed to do it. It's also possible, as has been suggested, that you think there was a cult of pregnant women kidnapping people in the area at the time who kidnapped her, kept her somewhere, had the baby for some sort of sacrifice, probably Odinistic. I know Bob Motta's here. And that's how it went down. And that's possible, right? But is it likely? And if all you have to support it is speculation, particularly on the pregnant woman kidnapping thing, at least the burglars were there, right? There was a burglary, so that's a good place to start. But then if you see it start to break down, it's like, is this really what is likely to have happened? And Alice mentioned governments. I mean, a lot of times these conspiracies involve governments, and sometimes people will say things like, well, what about the CIA and MK Ultra? Number one, if the CIA is involved, okay, maybe. I'm a little bit more open to believing it. And number two, you've heard of MK Ultra, right? They couldn't keep it a secret. And that's the thing. Like, usually they're not going to be able to.
Guys, we are back with one of our favorite sponsors, HelloFresh. And you know that with HelloFresh, you're going to get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. It makes home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. And that's why it's America's #1 meal kit. It's a new year, and whether your resolution is to save money, eat better, or stress less, HelloFresh, they got you. They are here to help. Say hello to your most delicious year yet with fresh ingredients and chef-crafted recipes at a price you'll like, delivered right to your door. Each HelloFresh box is packed with farm-fresh ingredients, and everything arrives pre-portioned right to your doorstep for less hassle and less wasted food. We recently made the shepherd's pie, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, Brett, I get decision fatigue trying to figure out decisions of what cases we're going to record, about what to do in my day job, and trying to come up with a new recipe is exhausting. That's where HelloFresh comes in, because you won't get bored with any of their recipes. I love that shepherd's pie that you were just talking about. We ate it so quickly, and you get to dig into the biggest menu yet with over 45 dinner options to choose from weekly, and even more market add-on items that suit any lifestyle. Go to HelloFresh.com/TPFree and use code TPFree for a free breakfast for life. One breakfast item per box while subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/TPFree with code TPFree. And join us in enjoying America's #1 meal kit. Most of you have probably heard me sing the praises of Prose and their truly custom made to order hair care. And switching to a custom routine from Prose was one of the best things I've done for my hair. And the results I'm seeing just keep getting better. I typically don't have time to go to the salon, do all the greatest things for my hair. And so when I found out that I could sit at my computer, take a quiz that customized the perfect hair care for me, I was sold. It is a one-of-a-kind made-to-order formula for my hair. Specifically, it asked how much I exercised, what I ate, the pollution content, and where I live, so that it could make a specific formula for my hair. And since I've been using it, I can absolutely tell that my hair is shinier, smoother, and softer. And the best, it's stronger too. And by analyzing over 85 personal factors, Prose does that for you as well. It handpicks clean, sustainably sourced ingredients that get you closer to your hair goals with every wash.
Yeah, Alice, the review and refine tool that Prose has is something else. My wife, she has curly hair. It is hard for her to find shampoo. It is hard for her to find hair care products that work for her. But with Prose, she was able to do just that. And if you're not 100% positive Prose is the best hair care you've had, they will take the products back. No questions asked. Custom made-to-order hair care from Prose has your name all over it. Take your free in-depth hair consultation and get 50% off your first subscription order today. Plus 15% off and free shipping every subscription order after that. Go to prose.com/prosecute. That's prose.com/prosecute for your free in-depth hair consultation and 50% off your first subscription order.
Absolutely. And that's another thing we try to do when we go into each of these cases. We don't try to look at statistically this could happen, so therefore it happened in this case, because you don't do that in the court of law. Every single case, it's based on the evidence before you. That's why there are evidentiary rules. It doesn't matter if most times when there's a child dead, the statistics say it's probably the parents who did it. That's a good place if you're law enforcement and you have no idea where to start. Yes, you should absolutely rule out that it wasn't the parents, but you can't use those overarching statistics or, broad-ranging kind of views without evidence to go about these cases. First of all, that's not just in the court of law, and that's not how we go about the cases that we cover either. So that leads to our fifth rule, and this kind of goes along with what I was saying earlier about your governments. Do not mistake incompetence for malice, specifically when it comes to investigations by law enforcement. A case that comes to mind, we also covered a while ago, it's a very interesting listen if you haven't heard it, is the very tragic case of Mitrice Richardson. So Mitrice was a beautiful young woman who clearly was having some sort of an episode mentally, and she needed help. And people were trying to get her help. She was at a restaurant kind of causing a ruckus, and so they called the police. She had ordered food. She couldn't pay for it. So the police did what often happens in these cases. They took her in and they booked her. But then the next morning, they let her go. And the police station was in the middle of nowhere. She didn't have a car. She didn't have ID at the time. And she walked away. and they found her body, her remains, in a deep canyon. And there has been a lot of kind of conspiracy theories around the law enforcement, knew they were going to do this because of her demographic. She was an African-American woman, and they did this intentionally, and they hid her body away into this canyon that you can't even hike to. You have to basically helicopter into. But when you look at the investigation, keep an open mind, because when you really dig into the facts, it doesn't look like malice. These police officers should have done a lot more for Mitrice. She needed mental help. She needed to be sent to a hospital. She did not need to be in the jail. And you know why they let her go that next morning? Because it was like 5 a.m. and they would have to do a lot of paperwork in order to keep her longer. And paperwork is a lot of work for people when they've worked all night. And that's incompetence. They shouldn't have done that. But if the evidence isn't pointing to some mass police conspiracy to somehow make sure this one woman was dropped off in the middle of a canyon, it probably didn't happen that way. And unfortunately and unsurprisingly, there's actually a lot more incompetence than there is malice when it comes to these investigations. Because remember, a lot of the cases you guys hear on TV are handled by big jurisdictions who see kind of these horrendous crimes a lot, and they have the expertise and the technology to investigate them properly. But if your small jurisdiction has never seen a murder before, or doesn't have a lot of experience in dealing with people who have mental illness and they don't have the resources to help them, a lot of times they just don't know how to do it. Not all jurisdictions are created equal, and not all law enforcement officers are created equal either.
And a lot of times resources are an issue. You think about Maura Murray, you think about Breonna Maitland, you think about these cases where people walk off and the police say, oh, it's a DUI walk off, they'll come back. They're probably fine. They're just hiding in the woods or whatever. And then weeks later, months later, they realize, no, something terrible happened to them. And 99 times out of 100, it probably was just a DUI walk-off. And they probably will just show up. But then when it doesn't, all of that focus comes on the police. And sometimes, I don't think in Breonna Maitland anyone thinks the police are involved. But certainly in Maura Murray, people do. And there have been years of theories about police involvement in that case and her disappearance. The most likely thing, it was cold and it was late, and this girl seemed like she had been drinking when she crashed. Let's clear the scene, be done with this, tow the car, and get out of here. And then you see this happen. It becomes a huge story, and then all of a sudden you're starting to talk about, is this some sort of malice behind this? And that brings us to our next one, the questions that you often have and will always have at the end of cases. No theory, no matter how good and no matter how much you know about the case, will ever answer all your questions or address all the evidence. Jeffrey McDonald is a good example of this. I think it's very clear that Jeffrey McDonald killed his family. I think the evidence strongly supports that. But the woman in the floppy hat is one of those things that sticks with you when you watch it. And it's just like, you just can't get past it. He describes this woman in a floppy hat holding a candle, chanting "acid is groovy," which is so over the top that you think that's probably not what happened. But nevertheless, then you have one of the police officers on the way, and what does he say he saw while he's driving down the road? A woman standing in the rain in a floppy hat. And you're just like, what are the chances? And there are explanations for that. Jeffrey McDonald, he knew the people in that area. He knew the people who were involved in drugs. It might have just been a lucky guess, but it's one of those things that always kind of sticks with you. I know we've never covered the Chris Watts case, but the Chris Watts case is one of those cases where you have someone who has confessed multiple times, telling different stories each time. But despite the fact he has confessed and we know he did it, we still don't know everything that happened that night or exactly how it went down or what triggered it. And we never will. And it is one of those things that can be a source of sort of doubt when you really shouldn't have any. I think Chris Watts is an obvious example of that because he absolutely did it. He admitted it. Jeffrey McDonald, I think, also did it. But these questions, they linger.
And this is closely tied to our seventh rule, which is that we will never know all the facts. A lot of times, by the way, that doesn't mean a case is unknowable or it's unknowable who actually committed the crime, because it is impossible in life, not just in true crime, for you to know all the facts. And we hear a lot about this in the context of, well, there wasn't direct evidence of it. There's only circumstantial evidence. We said it time and time again. And, if there's nothing that I do in this life, I hope that I can educate people that in the court of law, direct evidence is just as weighty as circumstantial evidence. There's no difference. It's just evidence in court, because direct evidence is that I saw you insert the blade into the person's body and take it back out. Circumstantial evidence could be so much more powerful. I saw you with the bloody knife. I saw you scream her name as, I heard the victim scream as well. And then you came out wiping the blade on your knee. And then you ran off and dyed your hair a different color and shaved your beard off and then disposed of all your clothes and then told your roommate that you killed that girl. All circumstantial evidence. Very strong. So with all that, though, we can't know all the facts. And part of it is because the people who hold the facts may never tell you. And a good case for this, of course, is the Casey Anthony case. There is a lot. I know, with all those groans, I know there's a lot there. But you know what? We've covered this case a lot. She's spoken about it in a documentary. She has said everything. We still don't know all the facts. And part of it is we will never know because there were probably only 2 people there when Sweet Kaylee died. And one of those people is probably incapable of telling the truth even if she tried, and that would be Casey, her mother. And so and she may not remember everything, right? And so just because you don't know all the facts doesn't mean something should be dismissed out of hand, because there are a body of evidence. This is how we go about all our prosecutions. You have an entire case file to go off of. So it's not fair to simply dismiss it out of hand or not even go investigate it. If you know that there's going to be a slice of information you'll never know, you need to get past that. And that's why when you go to a jury trial, it's not beyond all doubt. It's impossible to beyond all doubt. It's beyond reasonable doubt. And that's because, our founding fathers recognized that we would never always know all the facts.
And this is one of those rules that keeps you up at night, right? Because, you can be convicted of a crime beyond reasonable doubt and be innocent. Based on the facts we know, because look, the justice system is imperfect and will always generate imperfect results. And unfortunately, when it's the justice system, an imperfect result is either a guilty person goes free or an innocent person goes to prison. And those are some pretty bad imperfect results, right? And so you can see cases where all the evidence lines up. And this is one of the reasons we often say, if the facts change, we'll look at it again. Because sometimes you look at the facts as you have them and the conclusion you reach is this person is guilty, I don't have any reasonable doubt. And then maybe something that happens a lot, DNA comes up. Right? I mean, we haven't done the Stephen Avery case either, but his original crime, based on who Stephen Avery was and the kind of stuff he was doing, I think most people thought Stephen Avery was guilty of raping the woman that he was convicted of raping. And I think when they looked at the evidence, they thought it was an absolute knockdown case, right? But then you get DNA and you prove it wasn't him. The facts have changed. And this is why, as I said, as sure as I often am about some of our conclusions, you can never be perfectly sure. And like I said, that's the kind of thing that, particularly when you're a prosecutor, can keep you up at night.
If you're intellectually honest, yes, absolutely.
That's right. So the 8th rule, the most obvious suspect is usually the one who did it. So as we said, you don't decide cases based on statistics, but statistics can get you a long way. Right? The behavioral analysis unit, people are often surprised that the very first thing they do is just look at statistics. So they look at the victim, the race of the victim, the age of the victim, the gender of the victim. And then the first thing they do when they're looking at a suspect has nothing to do with any of the other evidence in the case. If they find a 25-year-old white woman who's been strangled to death, the person that they're going to say most likely did that is a white male in their 20s. Because people tend to kill in their own racial demographic. Men tend to kill women, as we know, and they tend to be younger when they do that. Now, they may be completely wrong, and the evidence may show them that they're wrong, but that's where they start, and they work from there. The case where I think this is pretty powerful that we did was Henner Kaifak. This is an old one. I don't know if you guys listened to that one. It was an October episode, so 20% of you probably did not. But it is a famous murder case from Germany in the early 1920s. And there are a lot of really dramatic theories about who did it. Maybe it was roving band of murderers, or maybe it was the husband of one of the victims who everyone believed had been killed on the front, and maybe he escaped a Russian prison camp and made his way back to Germany and killed the family, or maybe it was a serial killer from the United States who had originally been from the area but had to flee the United States because the police were after him, but he gets back there and he commits his crime. If you haven't read The Man from the Train, which details that theory, it's a great book, and I'm pretty convinced on pretty much everything other than that part, right? But there also is the next door neighbor who they'd had problems with for years, to the extent of, I think he had the father put in prison at one point, who was supposed to marry the daughter, who her child, who nobody knew who the father was probably him, who happened to be in the area, who was the one who led the group to find the body. You start looking at all the evidence, and all of a sudden, the most obvious suspect, the one with the means, the motive, the opportunity, the one who's living right next door, suddenly you start to think that's probably more likely than the more, maybe, as I keep coming back to, sexy theories that you look at.
And I want to go back to something Brett just said earlier, something about like behavioral analysis units. We work a lot with them, and when we work with them, they typically don't come to us and say, okay, you need to find these demographics because this is your killer or this is your perpetrator. Not at all. They work in statistics and they work in analysis, especially in cases where we have no idea where to start. You have to have leads to start, right? And sometimes those leads are dead ends. No one's talking. There were no witnesses. And so they're looking at kind of the crime scene and they're trying to give us statistics based on all the other crimes that they've investigated and that have led to the perpetrator. And they say, this is who we think it is, or this is the profile. And it's always that. We think this is the profile, but no way do you just go on the profile alone and prosecute, or that ends your investigation. A profile really is just another lead, just like multiple other leads you may get from anonymous callers or from, a signature someone leaves behind, that sort of thing. So just know that whenever someone tells you, like a behavioral analysis unit has told you who this looks like and my suspect doesn't look like it, then it has to be wrong because they've concluded this is the person. That's not how behavioral analysis units work in our experience with law enforcement. They give us a general profile and they're the first ones to say, could totally not be them. Absolutely. And if we have the suspect with the evidence behind it, they'll say, oh yeah, they have no problem kind of scrapping that profile, or the profile changes as they know more and more about that crime scene or about the interactions the perpetrator or the victim had.
And if you guys haven't listened to the consult with Julie Cowley, who came on our show, I mean, it's her and a couple other people from the unit, and it is as close as you're going to get to being in the room when they do those profiles. And those people, they go through the case and they lay the stuff out, and it's really interesting. It's a podcast people don't listen to enough, so definitely check it out. Okay, our 9th rule. I keep being like, maybe this is the most controversial rule. We'll see how many people gasp at this one. This one is now the most controversial. This is now the most controversial rule. It's number 9 because we didn't think it was that controversial when we made this list 3 years ago. And that is, people lie, but that does not make them a liar. I'll stop for a second. You can throw tomatoes if you want. Everybody, smelling salts. For the smelling salts. Okay. Just gave everyone a minute to breathe. In our jobs, we interview a lot of people, not just suspects, not just people charged with crimes, witnesses, people who have nothing to do with the crime. They're not suspected of doing any crimes. We talk to people like thousands, tens of thousands of people. That's our job, to talk to them, to try and decipher whether what they are telling us is true or false, to follow up, to pick apart, to cross-examine. So from our experience, we've never spoken to a single person in the world of our experience, including sweet old grandma who has nothing to do with the crime that we're investigating, lies a little bit. And that's because we are all self-centered, not in a negative sense, but we view the world through our own lens. And when you view the world through your own lens, that's a perspective that you have, and that's when you minimize or aggrandize certain parts of your story that fit your life. It has nothing to do sometimes with what we're investigating, but what we say is all through our own experience filter. And sometimes that filter makes it come out a little bit of a white lie or a little bit of a lie. So keep that in mind. Every person lies, but that doesn't make you a liar. And that also doesn't mean that you need to dismiss every single thing out of their mouth. If someone lies more often than not, you have the difficult duty of figuring out what to believe and what not to believe.
And by the way, this is why direct evidence isn't always that helpful, because someone saying they saw something with their own eyes is, again, through their own filter and through their own lens. You have to have other evidence to back it up or to disprove that part of their argument. And this is what happens in the court of law, and why, when a witness is on the stand, there's always the direct testimony, where the person taking their testimony asks them questions, but it doesn't end there. The other side always gets to cross-examine and pick apart and try and figure out what things they said are true and what things they said are false. But we are not supposed to, and it is not right, to dismiss everything out of someone's mouth because they have lied once, or even they lie a lot, and say we can't trust anything they say. You have to weigh credibility of the witness, but this is very important to remember, because this is how our justice system works, and it's also how life works. All of us have lied. You can just look into your own life and recognize that. And we see this a lot, especially when we're asking, like that sweet grandma that I was talking about. We interview, honestly, a lot of parents or grandparents of a suspect we're looking into, and they don't really know what we're looking into, but every word out of their mouth is going to make sure they protect their baby boy, whoever it is. They don't know that they're lying and keeping us from getting a very dangerous person off the street, but they are going to, because that's what mothers, that's what grandmothers, that's what family members do. We take that into account and try to analyze that relationship they have and view it through that lens, and then ask those follow-up questions to see if we can get to the truth.
And the case that we use here is not the case you may be thinking of. It's Ralph Stokes. So Ralph Stokes was convicted of committing murder. It was part of a gang of people who robbed a restaurant, and he was convicted of being the shooter. He says he wasn't involved at all, and he certainly wasn't the shooter. We absolutely think he was involved. If you look at the facts, it seems pretty clear he was involved. But we also think when he said he didn't shoot the person, that he's telling the truth. And the reason for that is not just because we want to believe him, or it's helpful for the final view that we want to reach. It's because the evidence points that way. The evidence of the description of the shooter, the evidence of the other co-conspirators, the people they hung out with. There's a lot of evidence pointing to other people as the shooter. So even though, yes, he's lying about his involvement in the crime, that part he's probably not lying about. And look, the more pressure is on someone, the more likely they are to lie. And there are so many, you talk about innocent people in prison, there are so many innocent people in prison because they lied about where they were, right? Like, were you downtown at this time on this block? And they know they were because they were robbing somebody, right? But they're afraid if they say, yeah, I was there, they're going to think they committed the murder. So the police already know they were there. But when they say they weren't, from that point forward, that's the guy who did it, right? And the police are going to be moving in that direction. That guy lied, but he's not lying about the fact he didn't commit the crime. And you have to look at that, the motive for the lie and the kind of pressure that somebody's under.
Takes us to our last rule. We made it, guys. And the last, hopefully this makes you guys chuckle, because it should. In extraordinary circumstances, expect the extraordinary, because what's the point of rules if we can't break them? And there are cases that are extraordinary. I know our first one was, where does the evidence lead us? The most likely suspect likely did it. But the reason some cases are cold and unsolved is because something completely unexpected happened in them. At the very beginning of our podcast, we started with theories, and we always kind of had, well, it's up to you guys to decide if it was a joke or not. But we would say aliens did it. And it's not really that we were exploring whether aliens did it, but it's kind of keeping open this 10th rule, that sometimes we may not be able to explain what happened, so we have to think outside the box, because outside of the box, things do happen. And they may be the reason this particular case has been unsolved for so long. And we need that creative thinking to be able to think outside the box and maybe go to it. And a great case is Michael Peterson. And Brett is just chomping at the bit to talk about his favorite furry friend.
Yeah, I mean, those of you who know the Michael Peterson case, a lot of y'all just think Michael Peterson did it, and maybe he did. But if you think it was the owl, that is not the most likely scenario, right? I don't think any of us would say, if I was a betting man, if you put a gun to my head, on any random murder, I would say it was probably an owl who did it. But then you look at the evidence, and there actually is evidence of the owl. And what we like to point out is there's as good of evidence that it was the owl as it was Michael Peterson, which is really more our point there. But it could very well have been the owl, right? John Benet Ramsey. Now, the position we take on John Benet Ramsey is somewhat controversial. We think it was an intruder. That is not the most likely scenario. When a child is murdered and they're found in a home, it was probably the parents, right? And that's not a bad place to start. We're living this right now with Delphi. We've been very critical of the defense's filing, most recent filing, but if they turn out to be right, that is going to be an extraordinary case. It's already an extraordinary case, right? But if they turn out to be right, that's going to be something unlike anything you've ever seen before. And that's the one reason that is as unlikely as it seems to me that they're going to be able to prove the theory that they've laid out, that in the back of my head, I'm like, well, I want to see what the prosecution says, see if they can push back on this, right? Because who knows? There is no more extraordinary case than that. And that's how we like to look at them. The 10th rule is basically our cop-out, right? And we got these rules and we're going to follow them until we don't want to. But hopefully we don't want to, because there's actually some evidence pointing us in the direction of putting those rules aside, much less like we talked about with the BAU. I don't hate behavioral analysis as much as people think I do. It's the ad hoc stuff that I don't like so much. But you start off, with like them, with statistics and everything else, the evidence can move them off of that, and you see that sometimes. So those are our rules. We talked about a bunch of cases, but what we really want to do with our last 20 minutes or so, if you guys are up for it, is we want to take your questions. We want to hear the questions that you have, and we will do our best to answer them. Yes, ma'am.
Delphi?
So her question, for those of you who couldn't hear, was Stephen Avery. So she's of the position Stephen Avery is innocent. In order for Stephen Avery to be innocent, there would have been some real misconduct by the police. And I think I would say a couple things about that. What's interesting about that case, and we have not covered it, but a lot of people who think Stephen Avery is guilty think the police are also corrupt. So a lot of people think Stephen Avery absolutely did it, and there's evidence of it, but those keys probably didn't just turn up in the corner on their own after 4 searches, right? It's almost like they thought he was guilty, so they wanted to help it along. And let me just say this. In a lot of police corruption cases, that's exactly what happens. It's not so much that the person turns out to be innocent, it's that the police decided they definitely did it, we don't have enough proof, so we're going to have to create some. You see that. I don't know what the answer is to how it's going to turn out. It's obviously very controversial. There's been a lot of coverage of it. I can't predict the future on that. Personally, I think Dassey was awarded a new trial about 4 or 5 years ago, but then that was reversed on appeal. And that's, I don't think either one of them are going to get out, but depending on how the new investigation comes up, which is ongoing, you'll just have to watch and see.
And I think there is a microphone floating around for people who want to ask questions. I've lost the microphone, but maybe we'll, let's see, this gentleman over here, is that okay? Right here in the third row.
With a fantastic beard.
Yes.
In the Cthulhu shirt. Stand up.
Hi, Brett. My question to you is, have you come to terms with the Dyatlov Pass? It's still keeping me up at night.
All right, number one, I love your shirt. Your shirt's awesome. No, I'm still obsessed with that. My dream is that one day they'll send us to Russia and we can do like a hike to Dyatlov Pass together.
I'm not going on that. You know what happened to the other groups that went. They disappeared. I'm not going on it. I will report from here.
That's actually, and I guess that's a good example of rule number 10 too, because usually if you die on the side of a mountain, in the midst of a blizzard, it was probably an avalanche, but it's obviously not an avalanche in that case. So, but no, I have not come to terms with it. Every time a new book comes out, I read it. Can't get enough of it. All right, next question. I have a lady here in the back waving her hand, and then we'll go to this person here. It's the problem with this like theater in the round thing we're doing, yeah? Just yell really loud.
You can yell. Testing.
So my first question is, do you have a list of descriptions for Alice?
So I do, because somebody put one together and sent it to me. And so from that point, I just started using that. So thank you. If you're here.
Stop doing Brett's work for him, you guys. Make him work a little bit.
Yeah.
And my second question was, Alice, I noticed that you went up 2 octaves talking to Bob about Delphi. So I've never heard you get that excited. So my question is, are you really just all in on the smoke and screen?
So I think end of case. So I think what she's referring to is the Franks motion that was filed, and we were discussing the Franks motion. I think it was very important in that instance because the filing was 136 pages, something like that. There was it was really written like a press release, and the purpose was to get everyone spun up and to talk about a cult and not about the person who the Franks motion was meant to be filed about. We are very passionate about making sure that people understand how to read these filings and not be misled by clickbait. And so I was very passionate because people need to understand what this motion was meant to do, what it did not do, and how out of the ordinary this type of a filing is from any lawyer in the court of law, and some of the damage, not some, a lot of damage it did. I said from the very beginning in that discussion, take as true. I do not think the lawyers fabricated evidence, because I will say that until proven otherwise, because it is an incredibly serious allegation to say that a lawyer fabricates any sort of evidence or anything in their filing. Those are all their opinions of what I believe is evidence, until someone tells me otherwise, because I will never make that allegation against another attorney. It could cause them to lose their bar license and sanctions to be filed against them. They could lose their entire career. That's why I don't think any lawyer will make up evidence. But I think the purpose of the motion was to get everyone spun up on something different than what the motion was meant to do. And our purpose is to educate people about those things so that you aren't kind of thrown to the wind and just listening to things, because everyone is supposed to be able to interpret these legal filings themselves. So we were giving you guys the framework to understand what was filed and how to interpret what was written in that document. That's why I'm passionate about it, because I don't like it when the masses are misled, essentially.
Does it make sense that the same company who controls half of online retail also passively eavesdrops on your private conversations at home? What about the idea that a single company controls 90% of internet searches, runs your email service, and gets to track everything you do on your smartphone? Big tech is more powerful than most countries are, and they profit by exploiting your personal data. It's time to put a layer of protection between your online activity and these tech juggernauts. And that's why I use ExpressVPN. Think about how much of your life is on the internet. Sadly, every site you visit, video you watch, or message you send gets tracked and data mined. But when you run ExpressVPN on your device, the software hides your IP address, something big tech can use to personally identify you. So ExpressVPN makes your activity harder to trace and sell to advertisers.
ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your internet data to keep you safe from hackers and eavesdroppers on your network. That's why ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET, Wired, TechRadar, and countless others. What I like most about ExpressVPN is how easy it is to use. Download the app on your phone or computer, tap one button, and you're protected. So stop handing over your personal data to the big tech monopoly that mines your activity and sells your information. Protect yourself with a VPN I trust to keep me safe online. Visit expressvpn.com/prosecute. That's expressvpn.com/prosecute to get 3 extra months free. Go to expressvpn.com/prosecute right now to learn more. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Guys, it is the beginning of a year, and as you all know, this can be a time where you can feel kind of down. The holidays are over, there's a new year in front of you, and you never know what it's going to hold. And maybe you have some resolutions that you've made and you want to keep them. Well, one resolution you can make is to think more about yourself and your own mental health. Therapy helps you find your strength so you can ditch the extreme resolutions and make changes that really stick. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule.
All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. You know, all of us, whether you think you need therapy or not, can really benefit from positive coping skills and how to set boundaries, because it empowers you to be the best version of yourself. Celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit betterhelp.com/prosecutors today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/prosecutors.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Frank's motion affidavit challenge, and they don't get to that until 105, right? I mean, I get it. It was 100% successful. Absolutely. But when it comes to the actual question of whether or not there's a Frank's violation, they really didn't even make that argument. Okay, I want to get somebody from over here.
There's a microphone right there.
Thank you. I have a question for Alice and then a homework assignment for Brett, if that's okay. Okay.
Perfect.
Alice, how, since you've changed your career, made that move, do you feel like your opinion about the cases that you review, the filter that you always talk about, has that changed a little bit? And do you fight with Brett more a little bit because of that?
I fight with Brett because he just needs to be put in his place sometimes. That's a great question. So I think both of us are really lucky that we've actually been able to practice law in multiple areas. So we've actually had the benefit of being on both the first side of the V and the second side of the V in our careers. That's given us a lot of perspective even before we started the podcast. It hasn't changed how I view things because the beauty of the law is it's teaching you a way to think. And no matter which side of the case you're coming on, you're supposed to use those critical thinking skills. There's no kind of predestined equation to reach a conclusion. People may think that about prosecution, but we will tell you, I have killed so many cases before it ever made it to the grand jury, or even after it went to the grand jury, because after I investigated it and looked at it with the most critical eye, even more critical than I would say our defense counsel are looking at, and I'm like, you know what, we don't have the evidence. I may even think this person did it, but we don't have the evidence to go after this person. And if I don't have beyond a reasonable doubt, I have the ethical duty not to bring that case. I bring that same sort of bar, that same sort of standard to whatever case I am working on. So it hasn't changed, but I do appreciate when people are able to view cases from different perspectives. And we try to do that. We always play devil's advocate. We do this in mock trial and moot court with each other all the time. We play the other side to ask all the questions. So the first time you hear the questions and the first time you think about those questions are not before a jury, are not before a judge, because that case, whoever's case it is, deserves all of our critical thinking on the upfront, because we know that once papers are filed, someone's life is affected, and that can't be undone.
Yeah, and I like to needle defense attorneys, but I really like defense attorneys.
I know, we like that.
I mean, yeah,
sure,
and
we like, everybody here, I'm sure we like the Bob Mata and you.
Yeah, exactly. I love Bob Mata. And you really want, I mean, it's hard doing a podcast with a defense attorney now, but I'm doing the best I can. But you really want good people on both sides, because that's how you're going to get to truth.
I think it was good for you both.
Good people. All right, what's
but
my
the homework assignment, if possible, can you listen to Guys Down the Hill? And next time when you listen to that excerpt, just Guys Down the Hill, think of it do you think it's possible that it's two different people, one saying guys, one saying down the hill? I just recently heard this theory, and then I heard that, and I cannot undo it in my head. So let us know maybe on Twitter or next podcast if you next time you listen to it.
And I just got to say, I'm so ready for this trial because all the speculation. It would be nice because in the trial, I think that question's going to be answered. Okay, I guess somebody from over here.
Do you think if you should always pay for an attorney, or do you think a public defender is going to be any good?
So we have a Legal Briefs episode, our love letter to public defenders. We love public defenders. They're great. They're awesome. There's nothing wrong with paying for an attorney, but I'll just go ahead and tell you, if you guys have listened to, what's the name of that podcast? Bone Valley talks about this. Federal defenders, public defenders, they are absolutely committed to their cases. They are great lawyers, and they are passionate about it. So, to me, if it were on the line for me, I'd kind of rather have a public defender, I think.
Yeah, I would too. Because remember, this is the type of thing they do day in and day out. They know the judges, they know the other side, and they've also seen a bunch of cases like this, and they probably have a rapport with the prosecutor's office to be able to have open conversation and, either cut deals or have conversation about the evidence that someone who doesn't practice in that jurisdiction a lot, they won't be able to know that.
Standing up. So we'll do a standing up.
I'd like to know if Alice ever accidentally called baby Brittany in her real life.
That's her name. What are you talking about? The number of people who are in my real life who are so concerned that's her name is amazing.
And I love what y'all do. Thank y'all for helping me find more refined ways to think about the different cases, and I just love y'all take on it. So thank y'all.
Thank you.
Okay. You. The person who's getting pointed at.
This one in the middle. We have 8 more minutes, so if you want to, put your hand up.
Hi. First, my friend Lisa is your biggest fan ever.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
I'm here with 3 of my friends, and we've had a beef for years now about a non-Saeed, and we're half and half. 2 don't think he did it, and I'm not going to tell you who, but 2 do. And I just want you to solve this.
Okay.
Like it's 5 years of fighting. So please resolve.
I'll let Alice take that one.
Who's Adnan?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, honestly, if we didn't solve it in 14 episodes, I'm not sure we're going to be able to solve it at this point. But, you know, what are you going to do? Okay. Right. Temujin Kensu.
So those of you who couldn't hear, she was asking about Temujin Kensu, who is, wrongfully convicted, and what people can do. Public pressure, right? So not just public pressure, but you hit it on the head. We do have a lot of means, more so than, a decade or 2 decades ago, to get what people, the public, are thinking about into mainstream media, through podcasts, through documentaries, through what have you. That's honestly why I went on the rant that I did at the end of the Adnan case, because there are very rightfully people who should be covering other cases, and we do have limited airspace. Even if anyone can publish a podcast, there are limited kind of appetites for these types of arguments, and they should be saved for people who really need them and where it could move the needle. So it means writing the governors. It means if a podcaster is saying, what should we cover next? Suggest it. Every podcaster should cover those types of cases, because you know what? We've said this, we'll share our research with them. We want more people to look at it. We're all about open book in terms of research. We don't own that research. We shouldn't, because it's all public record, and we want people to go to the primary sources. So use your voice in what you consume and what you ask for from not just podcasters, but from, Netflix watches your eyeballs and calculates what you watch, and make your voice heard in those situations.
And Adnan Syed's a good example of that. Whether you think he's guilty or innocent, without serial, without undisclosed, he is not a free man right now, right? And that does matter. If you're in Michigan, I don't like putting pressure on local prosecutors, because I think prosecutors need to make decisions not based on public pressure. But AGs and governors are elected for a reason. And AGs can look into cases, and governors can pardon people. And those are the people that you need to direct your efforts towards. Temujin Kensu's wife is very active on Twitter and is often looking for people to sign letters and that sort of thing. So my suggestion would be to follow her and try and involve yourself as much as you can.
From my lens, I just have to say I'm really your biggest fan, not that girl over there. But that's just my perspective, looking at the world through my lens. But my question is for each of you, what is the case that stands out in your mind that after doing the research, you changed your mind?
Yeah, probably John Bonet. Because I grew up just assuming the mom did it, right? That's what my assumption was. And then we did the research, and I was like, oh, yeah, she didn't do it. I think I even said that in the show. Growing up, when she died, I was what year was that? 1996? Can't even remember anymore. 1996. I was 15, and my mom was very convinced that the mom did it. So I was like, well, I guess she did it, right? And I haven't told my mom I don't believe that anymore, so don't tell her. But I think that's probably the answer.
For me, it would be Michael Peterson. I literally guffawed when I heard the owl theory. I literally guffawed and then made fun of Brett for a long time, and then wouldn't even research that theory. And then, look, at the end of the day, I don't know if the owl did it or not, but the point that we were trying to make is that there is as much evidence for the owl as Michael Peterson. And I literally laughed that theory, out the door before looking into it. And that shows that even I can be blindsided, because what if I didn't look down that path because I thought it was so ridiculous?
So we have 3 minutes left. I just want to say we're going to be down in the lobby bar at 8 o'clock tonight. We want to see all of you. We'll answer all
I
your
promised
questions.
her that she could ask a question.
To make that podcast on Jean Bonnet, with the law that President Biden has passed saying these cold cases will have to go to a cold case squad, and that the original investigators will not be allowed on that,
How long is it going to take before they do it? In the JonBenet case, there's rumors that, yeah, it's gone to a cold case. It sounds like they're having donuts and coffee once a week and going, yeah, let's table this. We'll talk about it next week. Nobody's getting questions. We're unaware on the inside of a cold case squad truly taking over and looking at this. Do you have any idea how long this is going to take? The law's been signed.
So the thing about those laws is they provide funding, but they can't force people to do things. The president can't force a state, for instance, to handle things a certain way. So I think it's like, if you're going to get this funding, you have to do it this way, is how they set it up. I don't know the answer to your question. I've heard the same things you have about the cold case unit, and I don't know. I mean, I hope that one day the genetic technology is sufficient to either rule out that DNA or have it point to somebody.
I mean, the funding is a huge deal, right? Almost every law enforcement investigative body has some sort of a cold case unit, even if there's not a dedicated officer for it. But you can imagine an overworked jurisdiction. They can sit down and review all the evidence of a cold case where the perpetrator might be dead or there's no additional leads, or a new case that just came in with a gunshot wound and that person can be probably apprehended very quickly. Of course, their attention gets turned. This is kind of the ever problem with every jurisdiction. So honestly, the biggest thing is being able to get funding, because you get people who are dedicated to that, and then to keep pressure on the cases. Most of these cases that are cold, we always say time is of the essence, because people's memories fade, and because they have been investigated just incredibly, unless someone speaks up, there probably isn't going to be a break. And so keeping it at the top of people's minds, because sometimes people don't know they have relevant information until they hear a case and say, wait a second, 1982, I was in Michigan. I did see something there. But as time goes on, witnesses die off, their memories fade. So keeping these cold cases in the attention, you never know who actually doesn't realize they have information. But oftentimes that's the only way there's going to be a break in a case.
Okay, guys, I think we ran out of time. Thank you guys so much. Come see us on Podcast Row.
Thanks, guys. We're going to run down so we can meet you guys there. Get some freebies.
Hold on to your jingle bells. Pluto TV has all your holiday favorites for free. Enjoy our season's greetings category with 9 holiday channels, including holiday movie favorites by Lifetime, Festive Fireplace, Holiday Lights, and Hallmark movies and more. Download the Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming holiday favorites on live channels and on demand. With thousands of free movies and TV shows, Pluto TV is your home for the holidays. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.